I started this painting a couple weeks back after taking a hike through the mountains nearby where I live, and we had just received some snowfall, which is a pretty common occurrence around here and something I'm fairly used to. But every once in a while, these moments arise where I'm just completely taken back. And this was one of them. We had come around a couple corners on the trail, and I began to notice the light shining through the trees, and it was starting to catch my eye. We came through this one section of the trail where it really intensified, and it never fails that when I see things like this and I experience times like this, I'm just stopped in my tracks, and I knew I had to depict something that related to what I was seeing. The area where we were hiking is a place that we visit often. I see this place all times of the year, spring, summer, fall, winter, and I've been through this spot many, many times in the past. However, this particular time was just out of this world, unique as well as beautiful, and that's what I tried to capture in this painting. I used a standard plain panel, which I gessoed several times and sanded. The paint I'm using is Gamblin Artist Oils along with liquid impasto, and I use primarily one brush. This particular brush is what I consider to be my plein air painting brush. It's a very crisp and precise angled flat brush. It's a smaller flat brush, which I think really suits well for loose painting with a tight feel. When I started this painting, I used a mixture of Indian yellow along with paint thinner, and I used a lot of paint thinner to wash over the board and then wiped it dry with a shop rag. And that gave me that nice golden tone, which I used to my advantage as I worked through this brightly colored sunset. I painted this piece a la prima using wet on wet oil painting techniques, and I painted this over the course of a few days. I pretty much worked all day each day on this painting, and I used less medium to a point where I was able to keep the paint wet throughout this entire process. On the third day, it was starting to really dry and tack up a bit on me, but at that point I was into the foreground and was able to tie my work into the previous layer, even though it was starting to tense up a bit in consistency. I really like working in this technique because it helps me with my plein air process. It helps me challenge myself and try to achieve what I'm after without taking a break and a hesitation to think about what I'm doing. I find that if I'm just doing it rather than thinking about it or pondering what I'm going to do, it allows me to just open up my style and really dive in and start feeling the paint more than thinking about what to do with it. And it seems like when I get into that state, so to speak, creativity really starts to flow for me. And that's where I feel like a lot of my work really starts to shine. And so I very much so love working in alla prima and working with wet paint. It's something that I didn't used to do in the past. However, something I found that really helped me advance further more quickly over time. And that's a personal thing. I think it's good to try something like this, like what I'm doing, and this technique. I think it's also good to try other techniques. I think every artist has a unique individual way where they can do their best work. And it may not be very black and white for a lot of artists. It's hard to discover that and what that is for ourselves, but the only piece of advice I have to find that for you is to just simply keep painting. In my own process, I feel like I never really knew where exactly I was headed. I just sort of tried to do something, and over time, those things started to accumulate into lessons learned and techniques learned and tools gained to my advantage, and all these different things started to make sense for me. And that was not something I felt like I could predict. It just came down to practice, and over time it fell into place. And at least that's how it it seemed to happen for myself. When I think about it, it's hard to put it into words. But what I do remember is that I just got up every day and got my brush wet with paint, got the paint flowing on the canvas, and took each day for what it was. Some days were failures. In fact, most days were failures. And that led to so many challenges, which eventually shaped who I am as an artist today. So anyways, the technique I'm using here is wet on wet. And I essentially tried to pre-mix my colors and then use those pre-mixtures of color to mix amongst one another to give me the final color that I was using on the canvas. So I like to pre-mix about 8 to 10 different colors. And in this particular case, they would range, of course, from straight white for the sun, a bright yellow for right around the sun. Then I mixed a very light orange, and then I added some magenta to mix a light pink, maybe a light pinkish orange. As I started to move away from the sun, I started to think more about the burnt sienna and using some ultramarine blue to darken some of these tones down. And what I tried to achieve was a gradient of colors that transitioned from bright and warm to cool, slightly cool, I should say, not too much blue, but cooler and darker as we moved away from the sun. And I used the brush to sort of, I basically just wanted the brush to speak for itself. So I didn't try to manipulate the paint too much beyond one brush stroke at a time, and then I sort of just let that brush stroke live how it wanted to live on the canvas. And I did layer on top over and over to achieve certain color mixtures that I wanted and certain thickness that I wanted. But I didn't twist the brush a whole lot. I didn't move it in unique ways like I do with a lot of my more detailed, realistic, large paintings. Oftentimes when I'm using my dagger striper brush, I like to twist that brush. I like to feel the paint, bend the bristles, and see what I can get the paintbrush to do for me. But in this painting, I essentially flipped that around, and that's kind of sort of how I work with any plein air painting or any painting that I'm trying to paint a la prima. I basically flip that around and let the brush lead me in a way. And I really let the brush do what it wants to do without trying to alter that. And I guess that's the best way that I can describe it. I'm using very thick paint, and I splatter that paint on very, not aggressively. I take my time, I go slow, but I'm not afraid to scoop up a large amount of paint on the brush and sort of slap it on there or lather it on there. I found that using thicker paint gives me brighter colors, more life in the painting. I feel like it provides more character. It's something that I'm really taking to personally as an artist, and I think I'll have more impasto-like work in my paintings moving forward. So again, all of this is wet paint, even at this point in the process. And I'm essentially just trying to mix these cool colors in with the warmer, brighter colors without creating muddy effects and without over mixing the paint. I want to maintain the colors I'm looking down. I don't want a lot of things to mix into what's already on the canvas, and so that's why I like using thicker paint. Impasto medium, I pre-mix them with my palette knife, and I scoop up a lot at one time on my brush, and that allows me to layer rather than mix the colors. And so throughout this process, you can see me add some brighter colors over the wet, darker colors that are already on there, and that's really just achieved through using very thick paint. And another thing I've found that has really been an advantage for me by using thicker paint is it's allowed me to become much more comfortable with the colors I use, the paint I use, and I feel more comfortable in general whenever I'm attacking anything on the canvas, whether it be an animal or a landscape or water. Having that ability to control the paint while it's still wet and on the thicker end of things, I think really provides a certain skill set to an artist that can be beneficial for all these different things. And I think that's one of the reasons I would suggest to paint more wet on wet and try to finish a painting in one session. Now, when I say one session, I don't mean one day necessarily, but try to paint it before all of it dries. I think it's a really good practice, and I think that's why plein air painting can be so beneficial as well, is that hurry up, rush feeling that you get is a challenge, and I can't say it enough, those challenges is what leads to the growth that we have as artists. So overall, I think this little 8x10 inch painting came out beautifully. And I'm definitely going to be doing more of them as I move into this new year. And I'm actually really excited to get back into these landscape paintings. I just feel more at home with them as an artist. And it really seems to fuel my soul much more than painting really anything else. And so I think you'll see a lot more of this type of work from me. And I think that I'll incorporate more and more of these smaller paintings as I work on some of the larger landscapes that I do. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little 8x10. And until next time, which will be a large landscape, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you then.